They say the death of a child is every parent's worst nightmare. But for me, it wasn't just the pain of losing my daughter that tore me apart. It was the betrayal that followed. A betrayal that I never saw coming. A betrayal that would change everything. I don't know how to begin describing that day. The funeral was everything I feared, and at the same time, it was nothing like I expected. There's no guide for this kind of thing. The sudden, unexpected death of your only child. It felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me, leaving nothing but the cold, hard reality of what had happened. Olivia was only 40. She was full of life, full of promise. Yet here I was, standing at the front of a room full of mourners, looking at her coffin. There was a strange emptiness inside me, like a part of me had been ripped away, never to return. I should have been sobbing uncontrollably, but I couldn't. All I could feel was a hollowness, a void. But there was something else that made this unbearable, something that gnawed at me and made everything worse. Aaron, my son-in-law, was acting like a man who just lost a stranger, not a wife. He barely spoke. His eyes never welled with tears. He wasn't grieving. He was, for lack of a better word, indifferent. At first, I thought maybe it was just the shock of everything. Maybe he was in denial. But as the hours went by, I couldn't shake the unease that kept creeping in. He wasn't even trying to hide it. His focus seemed to be on something else entirely. His phone, his watch, anything but his wife's memory. I stood at the back of the room, watching him, trying to make sense of it. Something was wrong, and I couldn't quite place it. My heart ached for Olivia, but it also ached with confusion and dread about Aaron's behavior. He didn't even seem to care about the people who were here to mourn Olivia. He was cold. Later that evening, after most people had gone home and I was left alone in the quiet of my house, I started to go through some of Olivia's things. Letters, old photos, memories of better times, anything to make the silence less deafening. That's when I found it. A stack of bank statements, with withdrawal receipts marked in red ink. The number that jumped out at me was $300,000, withdrawn from the account I shared with Olivia. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My chest tightened as I reread the figures, trying to make sense of them. That wasn't just a transfer, that was a robbery. And worse still, it had been done in Olivia's name, using her identity to access funds she hadn't authorized. I felt something I couldn't explain. Was it anger? Betrayal? Fear? A mixture of everything. Aaron had taken money from her account just hours after her death, just as we were burying her. And he didn't even have the decency to be discreet about it. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't have any proof beyond the paper in my hand, but it felt like a heavy weight in my chest. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table, trying to make sense of the shock, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, yet urgent. "You need to be careful with Aaron," the voice said. "He's not being honest with you. He's hiding something, and it's bigger than you think." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear. Whoever had called didn't leave a name, and there was no way to trace the call. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something much darker than I could have ever imagined. What was Aaron hiding? What had he done? I had no answers, only more questions, and as much as I tried to push them aside, the truth was starting to seep through. There was something deeply wrong with the way Aaron had been acting, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. But I didn't know where to start. I had no idea how to begin unraveling this tangled web, especially not with the grief still heavy in my heart. But I knew one thing for sure. There was more to Olivia's death than just an accident, and if Aaron had anything to do with it, I would make sure he paid for what he'd done. The days after Olivia's funeral blurred together in a haze of grief, but something about Aaron's behavior made it impossible for me to focus on anything else. Every time I tried to bring up her financial affairs, or even the simplest details about the insurance policy, he would dodge the subject with a cold, practiced indifference. His words were polite, but there was no warmth in them. It was as if Olivia had never been real to him. He wasn't grieving. He was just going through the motions. I tried to shake it off at first. Grief does strange things to people, and maybe Aaron was just trying to cope in his own way. But I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. My mind kept drifting back to the $300,000 he had taken from our joint account, money that should have been for Olivia's future, for our family. It felt like a betrayal of the highest order, and the way he acted, avoiding the conversation, made me more certain by the day that he was hiding something. That's when I decided to visit Olivia's house. I had to do it, even though I knew it would break me all over again. The house was empty now. Her laughter, her warmth, all gone. The silence was suffocating. I walked through the rooms, my eyes catching on familiar things. Her favorite books stacked on the coffee table, the old photo albums on the shelf, the soft, worn couch where she used to sit. It all felt like a cruel reminder that she wasn't coming back. In Olivia's bedroom, I began going through her things, trying to hold on to something, anything, that might bring her back. And then, in the back of her closet, I found it. A shoebox, old and dusty, tucked away beneath a pile of forgotten clothes. Inside were several letters, handwritten letters to me. As I read through them, my heart sank. Olivia had written about the frustration she felt in her marriage, the ways Aaron had become controlling, distant, and cold over the years. She mentioned how he pressured her to sign documents she didn't fully understand, how he had isolated her from friends and family, convincing her that she couldn't live without him. These were things I had never known. I had always trusted Aaron, always thought of him as part of the family, but reading her words now made me question everything. In one letter, Olivia had written, "I feel trapped, like I'm losing myself. Aaron is changing. I'm not sure I can keep pretending everything is fine." The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had seen signs of their strain, Olivia's tired eyes, the way she avoided certain topics when she came to visit, but I had always brushed them aside. She seemed happy enough on the surface. How could I have missed the depth of her unhappiness? But now, looking at these letters, I began to understand. She had been suffering, and I had no idea how bad it had really gotten. The grief that had already felt unbearable grew even sharper, but alongside it, a new, gnawing feeling began to take root. Suspicion. I wasn't sure what had happened to Olivia, but I began to feel that her death wasn't as simple as an accident. The pieces weren't fitting together. I had to know more. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't even know where to start. What did I need to uncover? What was Aaron hiding? The insurance policy, the bank records, or something deeper, darker that only he knew? I pulled out the financial records I had been gathering and started scribbling notes, making connections between Olivia's last months and the strange withdrawals. Something felt off. Too many accounts had been changed, too many decisions made too quickly. And there was Aaron, always hovering just out of reach, offering nothing but excuses when I tried to get answers. I kept telling myself to be patient, to wait for more information. But I couldn't. I needed answers now. My daughter was dead, and Aaron had already taken enough from her. I couldn't sit back and let him take more. With trembling hands, I wrote down the names of the banks Olivia used. I wrote down the dates of the withdrawals I'd found and the name of the life insurance company that listed Aaron as the sole beneficiary. As each new detail surfaced, my anger built. I couldn't keep quiet. I couldn't let Aaron get away with this. But where would I find the evidence I needed? How would I expose him without putting myself in danger? The questions ran through my mind, louder and more insistent. I felt more determined than ever before. There was something here, something Aaron had hidden, and I was going to find it, no matter what it took. I couldn't trust anyone but myself to get to the truth. I had to dig deeper, and I had to do it alone. Aaron had already proven that he could lie, manipulate, and steal. Now, it was my turn. And as I walked away from Olivia's house, a sense of urgency washed over me. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. I couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that had taken root inside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Olivia's lifeless body, the way her hands were stiff in that final photo of her, taken not long before the accident. She hadn't been herself lately, but what if that wasn't all? What if Aaron had something to do with it? I had to know more. The accident site was about an hour's drive from my house. I drove there alone, determined to understand what really happened. As I pulled up to the stretch of highway where Olivia's car had gone off the road, a strange feeling washed over me. The place felt empty, desolate, a few tire marks in the dirt, and the faded outlines of where the car had once been. I met with a couple of old officers who had been at the scene that night. One of them, an older man with graying hair, seemed particularly open to speaking with me. I explained my concerns, how the car didn't seem to have been in motion when it crashed. He listened carefully, and then nodded slowly. "You're not wrong, Diane," he said, his voice low. "The way the car was positioned wasn't typical. Most accidents leave the car at an angle, having spun or slid from the impact. But Olivia's car, it was practically parked in the ditch. It looked like it had come to a stop, but then, that's when the collision happened. That's when a chilling thought crept into my mind. What if she didn't crash at all? What if someone made sure it happened? The officer continued. Also, the seatbelt. It wasn't fastened properly. The latch was open, but the strap wasn't fully pulled across her chest. I felt a lump form in my throat. Olivia had always been so careful, so meticulous. She wouldn't have neglected something like that, not when her life depended on it. Do you think the accident was staged? I asked, my voice shaking. The officer looked uncomfortable, but nodded. I can't say for sure, but something doesn't add up. That's why they'll go back over the evidence. Just don't go jumping to conclusions. I thanked him, feeling both a sense of dread and a twisted relief. Maybe I wasn't imagining things after all. There was something strange about Olivia's death, and I needed to find out what. As I drove back home, I couldn't stop replaying the officer's words in my mind. The car wasn't in motion. The seatbelt wasn't fastened. It didn't seem like an accident anymore. It was as if someone had orchestrated it, controlled it. When I got home, I found Aaron sitting at the kitchen table, looking at his phone. He didn't even glance up when I entered, his fingers moving rapidly over the screen. The room felt thick with tension as I walked toward him, my mind racing with everything I had just learned. Aaron, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. I went to the scene of the accident. That got his attention. He froze, his fingers stopping mid-swipe. What do you mean, you went to the scene? His voice was casual, but I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. I spoke to some of the officers. There's something strange about how the crash happened. Aaron's gaze flickered. For a second, I thought I saw fear cross his face, but then it was gone, replaced by that familiar, practiced calm. Diane, you need to stop doing this to yourself. The accident happened. Olivia's gone. We need to move forward. He didn't answer my question. He was deflecting, avoiding. I could feel the tension tightening in my chest, the doubt growing inside me. His coldness was suffocating, and for the first time, I began to wonder, was this all just a plan? You're avoiding the truth, Aaron, I said, my voice harder than I intended. You're not grieving. You're avoiding it, and now you're trying to make me forget about what happened to Olivia. Aaron's jaw clenched. He stood up, his body tense, but he didn't raise his voice. I'm not trying to control anything. I'm just trying to get through this the best I can, and you should too. I stood my ground. I'm going to find out what really happened, and when I do, I'll make sure you don't get away with this. His face hardened. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then he shook his head. You're not thinking straight. Just drop it, Diane. You're only going to hurt yourself more. He left the room, his footsteps heavy. My heart pounded in my chest, but it was no longer fear I felt. It was fury. The more he tried to shut me down, the more I knew I was on the right path. That night, I began to dig deeper. I pulled out Olivia's bank records, looking for anything out of place. And there it was, transaction after transaction, ones that weren't made by her. There were large sums of money transferred to an account under Aaron's name, payments to a mysterious vendor I didn't recognize. And then there were the loans, the ones that Olivia had never mentioned to me. Every single thing pointed to one conclusion. Aaron had been hiding something, and I was just beginning to scratch the surface. I felt the urgency again, the need to uncover the truth. I had to figure out what was really happening here before Aaron closed in on me, silencing me the way he had silenced Olivia. I made a note of the transactions, marking down everything I didn't understand, and then my eyes fell on the insurance policy. I hadn't looked at it yet, but now it seemed crucial. Aaron was listed as the sole beneficiary, but what if it wasn't just the money he wanted? What if he'd wanted something more from Olivia? My suspicions were beginning to coalesce into something darker, but there was still so much I didn't know. I had to dig deeper. I had to find every piece of the puzzle. I just couldn't let Aaron get away with it. The weight of everything was starting to feel unbearable. The truth was out there. I could feel it, but it was slipping through my fingers with every passing day. I needed something concrete, something I could hold on to. I called a lawyer, someone who could help me navigate this mess. I needed guidance, someone who could put the pieces together for me. After reviewing the financial records and discussing everything I had uncovered, the lawyer's face turned serious. "Diane," he said, his voice low and measured, "I think you have a case. You're right to be suspicious of Aaron. But if you're going to confront him, we need to be prepared." He recommended we approach Aaron carefully, but it was clear from his expression that he thought Aaron's actions were no accident. That realization hit me hard. I wasn't just looking at a grieving widower who had lost his wife. I was looking at someone who had orchestrated something far worse. The plan was simple. I would sit down with Aaron, confront him about the missing $300,000, and see how he responded. With the lawyer's advice, I started gathering more documents, more proof, more everything. I had to be certain. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I walked into the living room where Aaron was sitting. He looked up at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. He hadn't said much to me in the last few days, but his presence in the house was like a shadow hanging over me. "Aaron," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need to talk to you about the $300,000 that was withdrawn from our joint account." His reaction was instant. He tensed up, his jaw clenching as his eyes shot up to meet mine. "What the hell are you talking about, Diane? You're acting crazy. The money is mine now. Olivia's dead. It's over. We need to move on." I could feel the anger rise in me, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Aaron, you don't get to decide what's over, not when you've been hiding things from me. Not when you're trying to keep me in the dark about what really happened to Olivia." His face twisted, and his voice rose. "You're being irrational. Olivia's dead, Diane. We have to move on with our lives. You're just making this harder for everyone." I stepped closer, keeping my voice low but firm. "What I'm making harder is your lies, Aaron. You think I'm just going to forget that money, that $300,000 you took from our account? No, I'm not forgetting, and I'm not going to let you manipulate me." He stood up abruptly, backing away from me. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Olivia and I had a plan, and it's none of your business anymore." His words hit me like a slap to the face. "A plan? What plan? You've been lying to me. Aaron?" I said, my voice shaking but resolute. "You're hiding something, and I'm going to find out what it is." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "I don't need to explain myself to you. I don't owe you anything." His words were cutting, but they only strengthened my resolve. The lies, the coldness, it was all part of something far darker than I had imagined. Later that day, I did what I had to do. I dug deeper into Aaron's past. What I found made my stomach turn. There were multiple loans in his name, huge amounts of money, all unpaid. The stress of debt was written all over the records, but more troubling was the number of times Aaron had used falsified documents to cover up his failures. It wasn't just negligence, it was deliberate. He had lied and forged documents for years, getting himself deeper into debt with every passing month. I called the bank, I called the creditors, I pieced it all together. And the more I found, the more I understood just how deep his lies ran. Aaron wasn't just an opportunist. He was someone who had manipulated everyone around him, including Olivia. But it didn't stop there. I started speaking to some of Olivia's closest friends, people I had trusted for years, and that's when I learned the truth I had never expected. Olivia had been planning to leave Aaron. Weeks before the accident, Olivia had confided in her closest friends that she was finally making plans to leave him. She was going to take control of her life again. She was going to leave the man who had slowly suffocated her spirit, but she never got the chance. One friend in particular, someone who had been a part of their life for years, told me that Olivia had spoken about her fear of Aaron. She was afraid that he would never let her go. The friend even mentioned that Olivia had been looking at apartments, planning her exit strategy in secret. I was shocked, my heart breaking for the daughter I had known, my strong, determined girl who had been trapped in a marriage she didn't deserve. But it all made sense now. The signs I had missed, the behavior I had overlooked. Olivia hadn't just been a victim of circumstance. She had been a victim of Aaron. The more I dug into the past, the more I realized that the crash wasn't an accident. It had been planned, an elaborate way for Aaron to get what he wanted. Aaron had seen her as a way to escape his mounting debts, to start over with a clean slate. He had taken everything from her, including her life. I couldn't shake the image of her sitting in the car, trapped, unable to escape. I began to wonder, was the crash orchestrated to make it look like a mistake? Was that what Aaron wanted? To take Olivia's life, secure the money, and finally be free? But there was no way I could let him get away with it. I had the truth now, and I wasn't backing down. The pieces were falling into place, and I knew exactly what I had to do next. Aaron was going to pay for what he had done, and I was going to make sure of it. I had to know more. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how little I truly knew about Olivia's life in the months leading up to her death. There were so many things left unsaid, so many pieces of her story that didn't make sense, and I wasn't going to rest until I put everything together. The breakthrough came when I reached out to an old friend of Olivia's from childhood, Jenna. She had known Olivia longer than anyone else, and I knew she would have insight into what had really been going on in Olivia's life, especially with Aaron. When Jenna agreed to meet, I could tell right away that something in her demeanor had changed since Olivia's passing. She was nervous, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater as she sat across from me in the coffee shop. But I could see the pain in her eyes when she spoke about Olivia. "I didn't want to believe it, Diane," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. But Olivia was really struggling. Aaron had a way of controlling everything. She was too afraid to leave him, even though she knew it was what she needed. I don't know how it started, but over time, he got more and more possessive. My heart sank as I listened to her. Jenna told me about the changes in Olivia's behavior, how she had stopped going out with friends, stopped calling as much, and how she'd often cancel plans at the last minute. The controlling side of Aaron was something Jenna had seen firsthand. "Olivia tried to leave him once," Jenna said, her eyes tearing up. "She was planning to, but when she told him she wanted a break, Aaron lost it. He didn't just get angry, Diane. He scared her. She told me she felt trapped." I sat back, shocked and broken-hearted. How had Olivia felt so alone? How had I not seen it? The picture was becoming clearer, but the pain of knowing that Olivia had been trapped in a relationship she felt powerless to escape was unbearable. The worst part was hearing that Olivia had been so close to leaving, so close to freeing herself from the prison Aaron had built around her, only to be silenced forever. But there was more. As I gathered myself, I realized that I needed to find out more about Olivia's financial situation. I had already uncovered signs of Aaron's manipulation, but I hadn't yet explored all the details. I started to look into the bank accounts that Olivia had used. What I found made my blood run cold. Several of her accounts had been changed in the months before her death. Accounts she had set up with me as a joint holder were suddenly altered, and Aaron had access to them. I called the bank, trying to hide my anxiety behind calm questions. The manager hesitated before telling me that there had been a series of transactions made from Olivia's account, each one larger than the last. Some of them had been transferred to Aaron's name, and as I dug deeper, I discovered something worse. There were withdrawals made from the account that appeared to have been forged. I could hardly breathe as the truth began to take form. The man I had trusted, the man I had treated like family, had been taking Olivia's money without her consent. But this was more than just theft. It was betrayal. He had manipulated Olivia into giving him control, forging her name, and taking what didn't belong to him. The bank manager also confirmed what I already feared. Aaron had gained access to the life insurance policy Olivia had taken out years ago. And guess who was the sole beneficiary? Aaron. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. It was about a man who had orchestrated everything to secure his future, and Olivia's death had been his ticket. I could barely contain my rage. How could he do this? How could he kill his own wife, the woman he was supposed to love, just to escape his debts and secure a life of luxury? The more I uncovered, the more I realized the extent of his manipulation. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let him walk away with everything. My heart broke as I thought of Olivia, how she had trusted him, how she had loved him, and yet he had taken everything from her, including her life. I had to find a way to expose him, to make sure he paid for what he had done. As I sat there, staring at the paperwork, a sense of urgency consumed me. The pieces were all there, scattered in front of me, but they needed to be put together. And I needed to do it before Aaron could destroy any more of Olivia's legacy. I wasn't going to rest until I uncovered every last secret Aaron had buried. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, for Olivia, for the woman who had suffered in silence, and for the life she could never get back. I was no longer content with keeping everything to myself. The weight of my discoveries was suffocating, and I needed someone else to know the truth. I needed to share what I had found, to let others see what Aaron had done, not just to Olivia, but to all of us. I started with the family, the closest relatives, the ones who had known Aaron almost as long as I had. I gathered them one evening, hoping for support, for someone to stand with me. I tried to explain everything, the missing money, the forged documents, the life insurance policy, but their reactions were not what I expected. Some of them, particularly Aaron's side of the family, dismissed it. "You're exaggerating, Diane. Aaron's been under a lot of stress. You're grieving, and sometimes you just start seeing things that aren't there." Their words stung. They didn't understand. They didn't want to understand, but I couldn't back down. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't seeing things. I was uncovering the truth, no matter how hard it was to face. A few family members did seem concerned, though. One cousin of mine, who had always been close with Olivia, asked to see the bank statements. She was quiet as she looked over everything, and I could see the concern in her eyes as she scanned the details. "This is bad, Diane. Really bad," she said quietly, almost to herself. But even she wasn't ready to go up against Aaron. I was on my own in this. The family wasn't going to help me. If I was going to get justice for Olivia, I'd have to do it myself. The tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. I couldn't just sit back anymore, pretending that everything was going to be fine. Aaron had stolen from Olivia, and the more I learned, the more I realized that he had been planning this for a long time. That night, after dinner, I received an anonymous phone call. The voice on the other end was quiet, almost a whisper, as if they were afraid to be heard. "Aaron's been in trouble with the law before," the voice said. "Fraud, embezzlement, he's done it all. He's good at hiding it, but the truth's out there." The words hit me like a punch. I had suspected Aaron was hiding things, but this confirmation, the fact that he had a history of fraud, pushed me over the edge. I had to find out more. I couldn't do this alone anymore. The next day, I hired a private investigator. I couldn't trust anyone else. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. The detective I hired was professional and no nonsense. He dug into Aaron's past, looking for any sign of financial misconduct, and what he found confirmed my worst fears. Aaron wasn't just a man who had stolen from his wife. He was a serial manipulator. The detective uncovered several instances of Aaron being involved in fraudulent activities over the years, from falsifying documents to embezzling money. It seemed like it was second nature to him. The more I learned, the more I realized that his entire life had been one big lie. But the most shocking discovery came next. Aaron had been trying to sell Olivia's house, the house she had poured so much love into, the house they had shared. He was preparing to sell it, which would have netted him a significant profit, far more than the $300,000 he had already stolen. It was clear now. Aaron wasn't just looking to get out of debt. He was setting himself up for a new life. He was trying to erase everything about Olivia and start fresh. My blood ran cold as I thought about how he had manipulated her, how he had manipulated all of us. He had been planning this for a long time, and I was just beginning to scratch the surface. But there was still more. The investigator found evidence that Aaron had been in contact with a divorce lawyer and a specialist in estate planning. It was clear he had been preparing for Olivia's death long before the accident. He had been working on securing his financial future, as if he knew what was coming. Everything was starting to fall into place. Aaron had orchestrated everything, from the way Olivia's death had been handled to the way he had positioned himself as the sole beneficiary of her life insurance. He wasn't just a grieving widower. He was a man who had carefully calculated every move, every lie, every step. The more I uncovered, the more determined I became to confront him. But I couldn't do it yet. I needed more proof. I needed to make sure I had everything I needed before I went to the police or anyone else. I couldn't let Aaron get away with this. I had already seen too much, and the pain in my heart was now mixed with a fierce, burning rage. He had taken Olivia from me, from all of us, and I wasn't going to let him destroy her memory without paying for what he had done. I was close now, so close, but I had to be careful. I couldn't let Aaron know what I was up to. Not yet. I had to stay one step ahead. The investigation was no longer a passive search for answers. It had become a carefully orchestrated pursuit, a pursuit that I would see through to the end, no matter what it took. With the help of the private investigator, I had started piecing together Aaron's every move. His actions were starting to tell a much darker story, one that I couldn't ignore any longer. The most damning evidence came when the detective uncovered a critical detail. Aaron had been in contact with Olivia's life insurance company on the very same day of the accident. I felt a chill creep up my spine as the implications of that discovery hit me. How could he have known? Why would he be reaching out to the insurance company at that precise moment, if not for one reason, to make sure the policy payout was secured? Everything that had been swirling in my mind for days now had a horrifying clarity. Aaron had been planning this, perhaps even before the accident happened. He had been preparing for Olivia's death long before it became a reality. The timing was no coincidence. I had gathered the pieces, the phone records, the insurance papers, the bank statements, and I knew I was ready. I couldn't waste any more time. Aaron needed to know that I wasn't going to let him destroy Olivia's legacy without facing the consequences. I arranged a meeting with him, one that I had been planning for days. The tension in the air was thick the moment I stepped into the room. He was sitting at the kitchen table just as he always did, eyes glued to his phone, pretending to be unaware of what was coming. But I was no longer intimidated by him. I had seen the cracks in his facade, and now it was time to expose them. "Aaron," I began, my voice unwavering, "we need to talk about the insurance policy and the money you took from Olivia." His eyes flicked up, and I saw the immediate shift in his demeanor. The calm, collected Aaron that I had always known was starting to crack. "What are you talking about?" he replied, his voice tight. He was trying to act surprised, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He knew exactly what I was talking about. "I'm talking about the fact that you contacted the insurance company on the same day Olivia died. I'm talking about the $300,000 you withdrew from her account. And I'm talking about the years of lies you've been living." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest, trying to mask the growing panic behind a cold exterior. "Diane, you're overreacting. Olivia is gone, and this isn't helping anyone. We should be grieving, not dredging up all this nonsense." His calm voice, the way he tried to dismiss everything, only made me more certain of what I was dealing with. He thought he could control me, that I'd just back down. But he was wrong. "You don't get to tell me how to grieve, Aaron," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "What I won't do is sit here and pretend that I don't know what's going on. You've been lying to me, lying to everyone. You're not some grieving husband. You're a thief and a murderer." He stiffened, the coldness in his eyes now replaced with something else, fear. His composure was faltering. "Diane," he said, his voice growing more strained, "this isn't the way to handle this. You're making everything worse. You're tearing this family apart." But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I had the proof, the documents, everything I needed to tear apart his lies, and I wasn't going to let him manipulate me any longer. "You don't get to make me feel guilty, Aaron," I said, my voice steady despite the fury inside me. "You don't get to make me doubt what I know is true. I'm not the one who destroyed this family. You did, and I'm going to make sure you pay for it." For a moment, he said nothing. He just stared at me, his breathing shallow, the mask slipping. The man I had once trusted was gone, and in his place stood a man who was scared, desperate, and cornered. Finally, he stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're making a huge mistake. You don't know what you're doing, Diane." I stood my ground, not letting his words sway me. "You've already made enough mistakes, Aaron, and now it's time for you to pay for them." I could see the anger in his eyes, but he didn't argue further. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding. I had confronted him, I had spoken the truth, and now I could feel the weight of what was to come. But just as I thought the meeting was over, I received a message on my phone. It was from Aaron. "You'll regret this, Diane. You have no idea what you're messing with. Stay out of it or you'll pay the price." The threat was clear, the meaning unmistakable. But instead of fear, a fire ignited in me. Aaron thought he could intimidate me into silence. But if anything, this message only fueled my determination. He wasn't just going to walk away from this. He wasn't going to make me cower in fear. I was going to make sure he paid for what he did. I had all the pieces of the puzzle, but there was one thing missing. One final, undeniable piece of evidence that would make it impossible for Aaron to deny his role in Olivia's death. I had been searching for it, waiting for it, and finally, it came to me. It arrived late one night, as I sat alone in the living room, going through the last of the documents I had gathered. The email notification pinged, pulling my attention away from the piles of paperwork. It was from the private investigator I had hired, and the subject line sent a chill down my spine. New evidence. I opened the email, my heart racing, and there it was, a file attached with a recording. The moment I clicked play, I knew I had what I needed. It was a conversation between Aaron and someone I didn't recognize. The tone in Aaron's voice made my stomach churn. "You don't get it," Aaron said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "She was in my way. always had been. The money, the life insurance, it was all there. I just had to push her to the edge. She was weak, you know? Always trying to hold everything together, but she didn't realize I was the one holding the strings the whole time. I could barely breathe as I listened to the rest of the conversation. Aaron's words were cold, calculated, and callous. He went on to brag about how he had manipulated Olivia's emotions, how he had controlled her every move. And then, in chilling detail, he discussed how he'd planned her death, how he'd made sure the accident looked like an unavoidable tragedy, when, in reality, it was the result of months of manipulation and deceit. I felt my hands tremble as the truth washed over me. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. For the first time in days, I felt something that wasn't anger or confusion, satisfaction. I had the proof. It was undeniable, and it would destroy him. But before I could even take a breath, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Aaron standing there, looking as calm and collected as ever. His eyes darkened when he saw the look on my face. "I think we need to talk, Diane," he said, his voice smooth, but the tension in his body was unmistakable. "What do you want, Aaron?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. He stepped into the room without waiting for an invitation, his eyes scanning the space as if he were deciding how to approach this confrontation. "I think we can come to an agreement. You've uncovered a lot of things, Diane. Things that, if exposed, could hurt both of us." I could feel the weight of his words, but I stood firm. "You can't manipulate me anymore." He gave a small, condescending smile. "I'm not trying to manipulate you, Diane. I'm offering you something." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "I'll make it worth your while. Enough money to forget all of this. Enough money to never have to deal with any of this again. Just think about it, Diane. It's a lot of money, and it can be yours." I stared at him, the disgust rising in my chest. He was offering me money. Money he had taken from Olivia's life. Money that was never his to begin with, just to silence me. "You think money can buy me, Aaron?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "You think I'd just let you pay me off? You think you can make me forget what you've done to Olivia? You're wrong." His expression faltered for a moment, and the veneer of calmness cracked. "You don't understand, Diane. This will ruin us both. You're making a mistake." I could feel the rage inside me building. "No, Aaron. You made the mistake when you thought you could get away with this. You've already ruined yourself." I didn't need to hear any more. I already knew everything I needed to know. He was trying to buy me off, but I wasn't going to let him manipulate me any longer. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about justice for Olivia. I turned away from him, my mind racing. It was time to take the next step. It was time to bring this to the people who needed to know. I couldn't do this alone anymore. The next morning, I gathered the family again, determined to show them the truth. I started with the most trusted members, the ones who had started to listen when I first began to question Aaron. But when I played the recording for them, things didn't go as I had hoped. Some of them were in shock, others in disbelief. But the most shocking reaction came from Aaron's family. They didn't want to believe it. Some of them defended him, suggesting that maybe it was taken out of context, that maybe there was an explanation. "You're just angry and grieving, Diane," one of them said, shaking his head. "You're seeing things that aren't there. You need to calm down." I could feel the sting of their disbelief. The betrayal of their loyalty to him was almost as painful as the betrayal of his actions. But I couldn't let them stop me now. I stood my ground. "This is the truth. This is what he's done, and you need to face it. Aaron killed Olivia, and I won't let him get away with it. Not now, not ever." The room fell silent, and I could see the cracks starting to form in their loyalty to Aaron. Some of them were starting to doubt him. But there was still more work to be done. I couldn't let Aaron get comfortable. He thought he could manipulate me into silence with money and lies, but he had no idea who he was really dealing with. I had the proof. I had the family's attention. And now, it was time to finish this once and for all. I could feel the shift in the air the moment Aaron realized he was losing control. He had always been the one pulling the strings, manipulating everyone around him. But now, with the evidence out in the open and the walls closing in, he was desperate. Desperate in a way I hadn't seen before. The first sign came when he showed up at my door one evening, his face twisted in anger. The calm, collected Aaron I had known was gone, replaced by someone frantic, someone who knew he had been cornered. "You have no idea what you're doing, Diane," he yelled, his voice trembling with fury. "You think you're some sort of hero? You're nothing. You're just a grieving mother who's too blinded by anger to see what's really going on. You're going to regret this." His words stung, but they didn't have the power to intimidate me anymore. He was losing his grip, and I was starting to enjoy watching it happen. "I don't care what you think, Aaron. This ends now," I said, my voice steady. His eyes narrowed as he took a step closer, his breath hot on my face. "You think you've won? You haven't even begun to understand the mess you're in. You'll regret turning your back on me. You'll regret everything." I stood tall, refusing to back down. "It's too late for threats, Aaron. Your lies are exposed. It's over." I could see him falter for a split second, his fear slipping through the cracks of his arrogance, but he quickly masked it with anger again, his eyes wild. "You think the family will stand by you? You think anyone's going to believe you over me? You're just one woman against all of them." His words were meant to weaken me, but they only made me stronger. I had already seen through his manipulations. I had already witnessed the cracks in the facade. Aaron's power over everyone had always been rooted in fear, and now that fear was gone. I didn't flinch. "I don't care what your family thinks, Aaron. I'm not backing down. You can't control me anymore." With that, he stormed off, slamming the door behind him. But even as he left, I knew I had won this round. The strength of my resolve was growing, and with every word he spoke, I felt the power shift into my hands. In the following days, Aaron's behavior became more erratic. He started avoiding people, withdrawing into himself. He was no longer the confident man who had once manipulated his way through life. Now he was desperate, trying to find a way out, but there was no escape. The web he had so carefully woven was starting to unravel, and no amount of manipulation would save him now. I, on the other hand, was prepared. With the help of my allies, friends, family, and the private investigator who had uncovered Aaron's darkest secrets, I began organizing the evidence, the bank records, the phone conversations, the insurance policy, the forged documents. It was all there, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. Every day, I felt more empowered. Aaron had thought he could destroy Olivia's life and steal from her, but he had underestimated me. I wasn't just a mother seeking justice. I was a force that couldn't be silenced, no matter how much he tried to intimidate me. I had my own plans now, and they didn't involve fear. They involved action. I spent days preparing the documents necessary for the trial, making sure everything was in order. The pieces were in place, and all I needed to do was take the next step, bring him to justice. Aaron, meanwhile, was growing more frantic. I could see the cracks in his composure when we crossed paths. He was trying to maintain the illusion that he was still in control, but his confidence was gone. It was clear that he was scrambling, trying to think of a way out, but he knew as well as I did that there was no way out of this. His isolation grew. The more desperate he became, the more people distanced themselves from him. The family that had once rallied behind him began to question his actions. Even those who had been closest to him started pulling away, realizing they couldn't defend the indefensible. It was in those moments of growing isolation that I realized something. Aaron was finished. He had no one left to rely on but himself, and even that was slipping away. The control he had once held over everyone was now gone, and I felt a deep, satisfying sense of justice wash over me. The closer I got to the trial, the stronger I felt. Every time I looked at the evidence, every time I reviewed the lies he had told, I felt more powerful. I had spent too long being manipulated by him, but not anymore. Now it was his turn to face the consequences. I was ready for the final confrontation. I had the truth on my side, and I was going to make sure it came to light, no matter how hard Aaron fought against it. The end was near, and I would not let him escape. The moment had arrived. My heart pounded as I stepped into the conference room, flanked by my allies, friends, legal counsel, and even a few family members who had finally come around to seeing Aaron for who he really was. The room was silent, tense with anticipation. It was a pivotal moment. Everything I had uncovered, everything I had fought for, was about to come into the light. Aaron was already there, sitting at the table, trying to appear calm, but I could see the tightness in his shoulders, the nervousness in his eyes. For once, he was not in control. He knew it, I knew it, and the time for games was over. The attorney representing me spoke first, setting the tone. "Mr. Aaron Jacobs, We are here today to present the irrefutable evidence that shows your role in the death of Olivia Jacobs, as well as your financial manipulation and fraud. You are not the victim here. You are the perpetrator. Aaron shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but he remained silent, his fingers twitching at the edges of the table. He was trying to gather himself, to maintain his facade of innocence. But I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth broke him. The lawyer continued, and with a steady hand, I placed the evidence in front of Aaron. Bank statements, insurance policies, phone records, and the most damning piece of all, the recording of his conversation about how he had orchestrated Olivia's death for financial gain. Aaron glanced at the papers, but when his eyes fell on the recording transcript, he went pale. "What is this? You can't possibly think this is real," he sneered, his voice low but tinged with panic. I met his gaze, refusing to look away. "It's all real, Aaron. Every word, every lie you've told, it's right there. You've been lying to everyone, including me. But you can't lie your way out of this anymore." He opened his mouth to protest, but his lawyer quickly silenced him, realizing that the evidence was stacked against them. But Aaron wasn't done. He still tried to cling to the illusion of control. "This is all just some sick plot." "Diane," he said, his voice cracking, "you've gone too far. These recordings, these papers, this is all lies. You've made it all up to destroy me. You're just angry because I'm moving on. Olivia is gone, and now you want to tear down everything I've built." His words were desperate, but I could see the cracks beginning to form. The anger that had been simmering inside me for so long was boiling over. I stood up, trembling, but determined. "You didn't move on, Aaron," I said, my voice rising. "You killed her. You destroyed her, just like you destroyed everyone else around you. Olivia was your victim. She was my daughter. She trusted you. You controlled her life. You manipulated her into believing that she had no one, that she couldn't survive without you. And in the end, you took her life because she dared to break free. That's not moving on. That's murder." The room fell silent. I could hear the collective intake of breath from the others present. But I didn't care. I had held this inside me for so long, and now, finally, I was letting it all out. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak. "You think you've won, Aaron?" I continued, my voice shaking with rage. "You think you've gotten away with it? You took everything from Olivia. Her life, her love, her future. And for what? For money? For power? You'll never get away with it. Not now, not ever." Aaron was shaking now, his mask of confidence completely gone. He stood up, his face twisted in fury, but I could see the panic in his eyes. He was losing. He had lost. "I didn't do it. You can't prove anything," he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. His hands trembled as he pointed at the documents. "These aren't real. This is all some conspiracy to take everything from me. You'll regret this, Diane." His words were empty, hollow threats. The evidence was undeniable. And as the reality of the situation hit him, he sank back into his chair, his hands pressed to his face in defeat. The tension in the room was suffocating. Aaron had no more lies left to tell. The shock on his face was evident as he realized that he had lost control, that he was no longer the one holding the power. I stood there, breathing heavily, as my lawyer addressed the room. "The evidence against Mr. Jacobs is irrefutable. We will proceed with charges for the murder of Olivia Jacobs, as well as for his numerous acts of financial fraud." I felt a weight lift off my chest. The justice I had fought so hard for was finally within reach. Aaron's lawyer attempted a final defense, but it was too late. The room knew the truth, and there was no denying it. As I looked at Aaron, sitting there defeated, I felt no satisfaction. I felt only a hollow sense of relief. Justice was finally being served, but it didn't bring Olivia back. Nothing could. But I had kept my promise. I had exposed him. I had made him pay for what he had done. And as I left the room, walking away from the wreckage of his life, I knew I had done everything I could to honor Olivia's memory. The courtroom was cold, sterile, like a place where hope went to die. Every detail in the room felt like it was closing in on me. The rows of chairs, the harsh fluorescent lights, the sound of the gavel echoing in my ears. Aaron was sitting across from me, still pretending to be the man who had everything under control. But I could see it, the cracks, the desperation. He was no longer the confident man who had once manipulated every person around him. Now, he was a man on the edge, trying to keep up the facade for as long as he could. The trial had dragged on for what felt like an eternity. The evidence had been laid out. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, the recording of his confession. And it was clear that Aaron had no way of getting out of this. But even knowing that the truth was on my side, I couldn't shake the fear of standing up there, of facing him directly. The man who had killed my daughter, who had stolen her life and everything she had worked for. When it was finally time for me to take the stand, I felt my legs tremble. I had practiced what I would say, rehearsed it 100 times, but the reality of it all hit me like a wave. I took my seat, my hands shaking slightly as I held the documents in my lap and looked across the room at Aaron. His eyes locked with mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something, maybe regret, maybe fear, but it was gone as quickly as it came. The prosecutor asked me to recount the events, to explain how Aaron had manipulated me, how he had taken advantage of Olivia, and how he had planned her death. The words felt heavy on my tongue, each one a painful reminder of the woman I had lost. I kept my voice steady as I spoke, my heart racing with every word. I trusted him, I said, my voice breaking. He was my son-in-law, and I loved him like a son. But what he did to Olivia, it's beyond anything I could have ever imagined. He didn't just take money from her. He took her life. He took everything. Aaron's defense attorney tried to discredit me, to paint me as an angry, grieving mother who was seeking vengeance. He accused me of fabricating everything, of twisting the truth to punish a man who had already suffered enough. He's not guilty of murder, the defense argued. This is just a case of a family tragedy, and Diane is blinded by grief. She doesn't see the full picture. She's looking for someone to blame. But it didn't matter. The evidence was too strong. The truth was too clear. The jury wasn't swayed by his words, and neither was I. Finally, the judge called for a verdict. As he read the charges aloud, fraud, embezzlement, and, most devastatingly, the murder of Olivia Jacobs, the weight of it all settled over me. I felt numb, detached from everything around me. I had never wanted to be in this position, to have to testify against someone I once considered family. But here I was. The judge's voice was steady as he pronounced the sentence. Aaron Jacobs, you have been found guilty of all charges. You will serve a prison sentence of 25 years to life for the murder of Olivia Jacobs, as well as additional time for your financial crimes. The room fell into stunned silence. I could barely breathe as I processed what had just been said. Aaron was going to pay for what he had done. The justice I had fought so hard for was finally here. But when I looked at Aaron, sitting there, his face pale and stricken with disbelief, I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel triumph. What I felt was something I wasn't prepared for, a bittersweet sense of relief, mixed with the unshakable ache of loss. Aaron had taken Olivia from me, and nothing could change that. No amount of justice, no sentence, no prison term would ever bring her back. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough. As I left the courtroom, surrounded by friends and family who had stood by me, I realized something I had been avoiding all along. Justice couldn't heal the wound in my heart. It couldn't undo the damage Aaron had caused. Olivia was gone, and no punishment could ever change that. But it had to be enough. The world would now know what Aaron had done. The truth would be out. Olivia had been taken from me, but she wouldn't be forgotten. Her death wouldn't be in vain. And as the door to the courtroom closed behind me, I finally allowed myself to feel the weight of everything. The relief, the sadness, the grief. I had won, but the victory felt hollow. I had done what I could. Now, it was time to begin the long road of healing. The months after the trial passed in a blur, and with each day, the heaviness in my chest lessened. I had fought for justice, and now I could finally breathe. The rage, the grief, the endless questions, they no longer had a hold on me. But the truth was, no amount of justice would bring Olivia back. The hole in my heart remained, and the pain of losing her never truly faded. Still, I had done everything I could for her. I visited her grave, the place where I had left so many pieces of myself. Standing there, I said my final goodbye, not in anger, not in regret, but in acceptance. I let go of the bitterness and the guilt that had consumed me for so long. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. I had found closure. It wasn't the end of the journey. It was a new beginning. I was stronger now, wiser, and more determined to live the life Olivia would have wanted for me. Justice had been served, and the truth had been revealed. That was enough, and with that, I walked away from the past, finally free to move forward. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.